Hey, Psych students. So Module 17 was a short piece on influences on perception. I think it's fairly easy for you to understand that based on the reading, so I'm going to move to Module 18, which requires a little bit more explanation. So today we're going to explore your vision as a sense and how it works. Here's a quick intro video to your eye.
Sight, a precious gift we can't take for granted. Our eyes are windows to the wonders of the world. All we know and love, experience and discover, ponder and cherish. Let's peer into the workings of the eye, a unique and self-sustaining system. The reflected light of the world enters through the crystal transparency of the cornea, aqueous humor, lens, and vitreous humor to project onto the photoreceptors of the retina, whose impulses converge on the optic nerve and then to the brain to be transfigured into imagery and imbued with meaning. Continual adjustments to the pupil and lens regulate the entry and focusing of light. In today's world, the eye's surface is constantly challenged to protect itself and adjust to changing conditions. Every blink helps our eye's natural defense system, the tear film, retain moisture and maintain visual acuity. Tears contain potent natural disinfectants to keep bacteria at bay, and the tear system washes away impurities to maintain eye health. The miraculous biology of our eyes inspires us to develop ways we can protect and maintain comfort for these remarkable structures. For all the wonders our eyes provide throughout our lives, we owe them our attention and ongoing care.
Module 18's objectives are to describe the characteristics of visible light and how the eye transforms energy into neural messages, to be able to explain how the eye and brain process visual information, and the theories that help us understand color vision. Our eyes receive light energy and transduce, which is to transform, it into neural messages that our brain then processes into what we consciously see. How does such a taken for granted yet remarkable thing happen? When you look at a bright red tulip, what strikes your eye is not particles of the color red, but pulses of electromagnetic energy that your visual system perceives as red. I'm going to go over this in just a little bit, but do you know that, these are the rays that are out there in the world, and what a human being can actually experience is just a sliver of those bands. So honeybees, for example, bees in general, can see ultraviolet rays. They can see more of what's out there, which is interesting when we think about what's around us, and we generally assume that what we see is our reality, but in effect, there's all kinds of other things you can't perceive visually. What we see as visible light is but a thin slice of the whole spectrum of electromagnetic energy, ranging from the imperceptibly short gamma waves to the really long waves of radio transmission. Other organisms are more sensitive to differing proportions of spectrum. Two things that impact the way that we see is the wavelength of the electromagnetic energy that you're experiencing as a visual. So wavelength is a distance from the peak of one light or sound wave to the peak of the next. Electromagnetic wavelengths vary from short blips of cosmic rays to really long pulses of radio transmission. Two physical characteristics of light help determine how we experience them. A light's wavelength, the distance from one wave peak to the next, for example, helps us to see a particular thing, and that determines its actual hue, the color we experience, such as the tulip's red petals or the green leaves. The intensity, the amount of energy in light waves, determined by the wave's amplitude or height, influences how bright the color is. To understand how we transform physical energy into color and meaning, we first need to understand like the vision's window, the eye itself. Just in case you need it. I'm going to go, you can pause on that if you need to do that quickly, and I'm going to click on the hue too. Should have done that in the same order. So you already saw a little bit about this, but I just think this is really interesting to think about. Bees can see all of this, and we as humans, which we assume are the kind of the most developed, can see that. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the eye itself. So shortwave blue, longwave red, amplitude is bright, and dullness. Okay, so here we go. Light enters the eye through something called the cornea, which protects the eye and bends light to provide focus. The light then passes through the pupil. The pupil is a small, adjustable opening surrounding the pupil and controlling its size is the iris. The iris is a colored muscle that dilates or constricts in response to light. Well, it responds to the light's intensity, but it can even respond to like your emotions as well. Behind the pupil is the lens. That focuses incoming light rays into an image on the retina. All this you'll see actually playing itself out in just a minute. The retina is a multi-layered tissue on the eyeball's sensitive inner surface. The lens focuses the rays by changing its curvature in a process called accommodation. For centuries, scientists knew that when an image of a candle passes through a small opening, it casts an inverted mirror image on a dark wall behind. If the retina receives this sort of upside-down image, how can we see the world right side up? The ever-curious Leonardo da Vinci had an idea. Perhaps the eye's watery fluids bend the light's rays, like reinverting the image to its upright position as it reaches the retina. But then in 1604, the astronomer and optics expert Johannes Kepler showed that the retina does receive an upside-down image of the world. And how could we understand such a world? I leave it, said the befuddled Kepler, to natural philosophers. Eventually, the answer, though, did become clear. The retina doesn't see a whole image. Rather, its millions of receptor cells convert particles of light energy into neural impulses, forward those to the brain. There, the impulses are reassembled into a perceived upright-seeming image. So here's just a quick review. Pupil is the adjustable opening. The iris is the muscle that constricts, kind of controlling the amount of light that comes into the eye. The lens helps focus images on the retina, which is a multi-layered muscle. It controls receptor rods and cones. We'll look at those in just a little bit. Here we go. If you could follow a single light energy particle into your eye, you would first make your way through the retina's outer layer of cells to its buried deep receptor cells, the rods and cones. There you would see the light energy trigger chemical changes that would spark neural signals, activating nearby bipolar cells. The bipolar cells in turn would activate the neighboring ganglion cells, whose axons twine together like strands of rope to form the optic nerve. Rods are retinal receptors that detect black, white, and gray, necessary for peripheral and twilight vision when the cones don't respond. And cones are retinal receptors that are concentrated near the center of the retina and that function in daylight or in well-lit conditions. These cones detect fine detail and give rise to color sensation. The nerve would carry your information to your brain where your thalamus stands ready to distribute the information. The optic nerve can send nearly 1 million messages at once through its nearly 1 million ganglion fibers. The auditory nerve, which enables hearing, carries much less information through its mere 30,000 fibers. We pay a small price for this eye-to-brain highway. Where the optic nerve leaves the eye, there are no receptor cells. This creates something called a blind spot. You guys have probably experienced a blind spot before, especially when you're driving. You know that there's a spot in the car that you can't see, but your eye has a blind spot as well. If you close one eye, you won't see a black hole, however. Without seeking your approval, your brain kind of fills in the hole. We'll try that experiment a little bit later on. I have a couple of eye experiments that would be a lot better off in class. Rods and cones differ in where they're found in and what they do. Cones cluster in and around something called the fovea, the retina's area of central focus. Many have their own hotline to the brain. Each one transmits to a single bipolar cell that helps relay the cone's individual message to the visual cortex, which devotes a large area to input from the fovea. These direct connections preserve the cone's precise information, making them better able to detect fine detail. Rods don't have a hotline. They share bipolar cells with other rods, sending combined messages. Your optic nerve is the nerve that carries neural impulses from the eye to the brain itself. Here's another kind of look at how the visual information gets processed. Through the retina, down the optic nerve, to the visual area of the thalamus, and then back to a part of the brain that is responsible for the visual cortex. David Hubel and a guy named Torsten Wiesel in 1979 received a Nobel Prize for their work on feature detectors, which generally speaking is figuring out what areas of the brain help to detect certain things. So for example, feature detector cells derive their name from the ability to respond to a scene's specific features, to particular edges, lines, angles, movements. There's groups of things called supercell clusters that respond to more complex patterns. So at the end of the day, thanks to a specialized neural network, recognizing them from different viewpoints are like they're specialized parts of the brain that recognize different viewpoints. If this region is damaged, you might recognize other forms and objects, but like the lady we started this whole unit with, you might not be able to recognize faces. So there's specific parts that are good for recognizing like houses and chairs and faces, which are obviously different. So feature detectors definition is nerve cells in the brain that respond to specific features of the stimulus, which revolve around shape, angle, movement, and subtleties. Actually see on a regular basis is a product of parallel processing. So to analyze a visual scene, your brain has to divide what it sees into subdimensions: motion, form, depth, cover, color, and it works on all of these simultaneously to produce an actual image in your head. So there is a lot going on. so that you can recognize a face or a bird in flight.